Mr. Assistant Speaker, I want to start with a quote. The quote, this is about this legislation. This is government policy, and what we've done is ensure we implement the recommendations of the Productivity Commission. The quote goes on to say, the Productivity Commission said this is the right policy for New South Wales. And then, we're not going to apologise for investing in the infrastructure that will bring on new housing supply because we want to support first-time buyers being able to get their foot in the door, Mr. Keane said. Mr. Keane, Matt Keane, said that in February this year when he was strenuously supporting this legislation and proposing it for the people of New South Wales. I gather, I wasn't here at the time, but I gather he also strongly advocated the legislation in a committee inquiry which looked into it.
So did
and it's really interesting that he's not in the chamber here today talking about this legislation because it was he who initiated the Productivity Commission. Matt Keane reinvigorated it. I understand Anthony Roberts was also a very strong advocate for this legislation in his ministerial capacities. So it's really quite amazing that we've seen this backflip from an opposition who have now are making a habit of forgetting the people of New South Wales and instead trying to work out what they see as being the most politically opportune position to take on any legislation. We've got an opposition that's come in here talking about something which they advocated. And they advocated it because it was something that was recommended by the Productivity Commission's review, because it enabled a simplification of the developer contribution project, because it enabled targeting projects that met strategic planning priorities, and it enabled an elimination of some of the old problems where areas which needed larger infrastructure projects couldn't put those contributions together to actually achieve those. So all very sensible things that in government the Liberals and Nationals apparently supported, but in opposition they've flip-flopped on and decided that it's not for them. And I think there was this sort of a vague little thing about what might happen in the upper house. And really, and I acknowledge the minister's interjection there, because really doesn't that characterise the way that we're seeing the opposition going at the moment? It's a sort of a maybe opposition where you see these differences in opinion emerging within the opposition and in their public positions. It's a leadership vacuum that we're seeing. Yesterday they were in here speaking in favour of protecting Sydney Water, but then having people who were speaking in favour of privatisation in the same debate. They then split on the vote, with the Nationals voting against the legislation and the Liberals voting for it. First time I can remember seeing that happen. They took a magic pudding approach on stamp duty, where they just wanted to have everything. They wanted us to spend an extra $700 million. And in doing so, we're so confused about how they do it that they actually breached Section 46 of the Constitution Act with their amendments. So, you've got an opposition that's in absolute chaos on active kids. Last week they told us there was no cabinet submission. Yesterday they were telling us there was. What we actually know is there wasn't even a PBO submission on it to put the money forward in the forward estimates or in the public's eyes. So just another bit of dishonesty as we see constantly from this opposition, where they say that they were going to fund things, but because they wanted the forward estimates to look better, they didn't include them. On the Voice, before the election, a strong principled position. After the election, maybe we'll just wait and see what's politically opportune for us. So it's becoming just a habit from this opposition to roll in here and adopt a new position a day, no leadership, no direction, no principled position on any of the legislation that we're seeing coming forward, just the no-elition that we see in Canberra as well, or the maybe-elition, as the minister correctly interjects, because who knows, they might change their mind, they might split on this vote as well. There might be the ones who come in and say, but hang on, before the election, I strenuously advocated for this reform and said it was a good idea, because before the election apparently they were concerned to make sure that New South Wales was actually getting the revenue from developers which would enable us to build this really important infrastructure that services growing communities. Because what do you hear so often from growing communities in New South Wales, right around New South Wales? I know that you would in Western Sydney, as I do in areas like Googong in Queanbeyan. what do you hear from them? So often they want to see the infrastructure being rolled out at the same time as the residences, and it's part of what attracts people to go and live in those areas and to build. So this important legislation is going to do that. It's going to assist us with the funding for some of these important infrastructure things. It's put in place some really important protections to make sure that we don't see the sort of dodgy stuff that we saw from those opposite in government, where their favourite area or an area which was held by them but wasn't held by Labor got the money. So it makes it very clear in this that this funding has to go to areas which are actually in a published meet strategic planning priorities, including local housing targets that can be delivered in a reasonable time and are aligned to agency asset management plans to ensure delivery agencies are geared towards growth in infrastructure. And I'm quoting the Minister there, so I thought it was very good. This is really important legislation. It's something which provides the people of New South Wales with some certainty that developer contributions are going to help them to get the infrastructure they need. It doesn't take away money from local councils, because local councils will still have their infrastructure contributions going to them. That's a really important point. And really, it just blows me away that we get the opposition coming in here today completely backflipping on the public position they took all the lead up to the election, all the previous year from the moment the Productivity Commission came down, and instead they see some political advantage in getting here and banging on in a partisan way and being the no-alition. But look, we've been here, less than 3 weeks, and we're sort of coming to expect this from the rudderless mob opposite. They've got no policy positions, they've got no principle, they just bang on and on about whatever they think is going to get them a line in a paper or a little bit of cheap political benefit. Here we are again today. We've seen it on Active Kids, we've seen it on The Voice, we've seen it on the Sydney Water. In fact, we saw this amazing bit of chaos from the opposition yesterday with their amendments on Sydney Water, which Nationals were very strongly supporting, but which on my reading would have actually made it. You should have listened to this. On my reading, would have actually made it illegal for Griffith to get its water supply out of a privately owned channel. Just a bizarre set of ill-thought-through amendments. A bizarre thought of ill-thought-through amendments from an opposition that's all over the place. It really is a sample of the chaos and lack of leadership that we see from this opposition in this place. And the people of New South Wales, in observing this, I think will see right through it, see it for exactly what it is. Mr. Assistant Speaker, I strongly endorse this legislation.
The question is that the bill be read a second time. I call the member for Auburn.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Speaker. Yes, take your phone. Thank you very much. I rise also to support the legislation before the House, the Environmental